Hey now everyone, it's Steve Severs for Bionic. I can't tell you how excited I am to be back at San Diego Comic-Con. Before we get started, please give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. We appreciate your support. Now, let's go see who we can talk to. Could you first start off just talking about your characters in the show, backstory?
Alright, so I play Mac. How I would describe Mac, she's foul-mouthed, she's a little bit too assertive at times, she's brazen, and she's just this guarded little street tough. And she's come from a rough home, but underneath it all, she really has a heart of gold, and she's a much more complex creature than she lets on.
I would say Tiff is an encyclopedic, curious fireball because she always wants to know more and learn more, and I love how she applies her encyclopedic knowledge to how she lives in the world and to how she uses technology and how she applies her technology to her relationships. And she's kind of lonely at first because she's the only child and her parents work all the time. So meeting these girls really helps her, and it forms that it fills that hole in her heart, and they form that familial relationship. And I think Tiff's great. I love her.
I love Tiff too.
I love that too.
I've seen the first two episodes, and they're fantastic. I'm totally hooked. I had to stop so I could come down here. But your characters are at odds at first. You're very antagonistic towards each other. So can you talk about, I know one of the overarching themes of the season is friendship and how that grows. So can you talk a little bit about how your characters kind of grow towards each other?
Right. So I guess for Mac, she hasn't been around many other girls her age. Especially not girls like Tiffany or like KJ or like Erin. And I think she has a pretty low tolerance for them at the beginning. I think she's pretty much over it right when they start out together. But they're a really positive influence on her. Being around them has allowed her to let her guard down a little bit and actually sort of be herself more. And I think that's a really beautiful relationship that they formed. All of their arcs are just beautifully done.
I would say that they really bonded through those shared experiences that could be considered traumatic. I think being in those high-pressure situations forced them to realize that there are similarities between the four of them, and I really think that led to the original spark of their friendship beginning. And then, spending time with these girls throughout these experiences really helped solidify that bond, I would say.
So obviously, the show takes place before I was born. How did you guys try to embody kids from the 80s? Who grew up in a time when, you couldn't have a cell phone in your pocket all the time,
Personally, I really tried to get into how Tiff would think about the 80s. So I researched movies that I think Tiff would like Berry Gordy's The Last Dragon and Coming to America, and then also music that Tiff would like Salt and Pepper, like Twist and Shout, or When Doves Cry by Prince, just trying to get into the Tiff mindset, and then of course asking my parents, because they were alive in the 80s, so yeah.
And I would say for Mac, as far as embodying somebody, I guess, who grew up in the 1980s, I think it's really easy to just look at what somebody's wearing in a Polaroid photo, and that's all they are. It's just the style or the trends of the time. And I think just really getting into who they are as a person, because people are always the same throughout history, and just knowing who they as an individual are, who they are is the most important thing to me. And I also, of course, listen to the kind of music Mac maybe would, just kind of understanding her as a character.
So I wanted to ask, we do a lot of postmortems on our site, and so I wanted to talk to you guys about some key moments for both your characters. For Sofia, for you, it's when KJ rescues Mac and you're on the bike and you do the embrace. There's a lot of subtext under that. There's a lot of that she feels like she's losing by going back to the girls. Can you talk about that? And then Camryn, can you talk about the connection you have with your character has with Larry, in that you guys are the only ones who really kind of are concerned with the actual what's going on and trying to get to the bottom of it.
Well, Mac is sort of in the unique position of not necessarily wanting to go back. She has a really rough life back at home, and she figures the future can't be any worse than what I'm already dealing with. And I just think that throughout the journey, Mac encounters somebody that she once knew. I don't want to give anything away, but really just building on that relationship, and finally she's found something that she's really comfortable and happy with. And of course something happens, things happen throughout the show. I don't want to give anything away. I'm just trying to tiptoe around every single plot point possible. But I guess just for Mac, she's had it rough, and she's worried that it's going to be like that for the rest of her life. So she's just trying to cling to what she has in the moment. I'm sorry, I didn't get specific at all. I'm just trying to jump around it.
Well done.
I would say for Tiff and Larry's relationship, Tiff is not used to really being understood, because I would say she's very intelligent and she is very encyclopedic, and people don't really understand that sometimes. And especially not the whole time war, time travel thing. So when she meets Larry, it's this instant like, wow, somebody finally understands me moment. And I think that makes them instantly close. And yeah, I think there is a twist that happens in the show. You have to watch and see what that is. But but I think just have that bond with Larry made it it gave Tiff that sense of, wow, somebody finally understands me. And I didn't spoil anything, so I think I'm gonna stop there where I'm gonna stop when I'm ahead.
So what was it like to playing characters opposite of actors that were playing the same character? Like, how did you sync up? What was the chemistry like between you and your
All right. So I'll say for Mac's journey, you're gonna have to watch and see what happens with Mac. But one plot point that I'll talk about that is explored is Mac and her brother are sort of emphasized in the show, and the actor who played Mac's brother, Cliff Chamberlain, was such a generous and giving actor. Just being in a scene with him, he said, "You just do your thing." He took certain mannerisms of mine, and he did that to kind of give that sibling relationship. He really just dove into it, and it was an honor to work with an actor of his caliber.
Yeah. The question was how our real life was like our characters' relationship.
Like, how was it for you guys playing someone that is also playing the same character? Like, how did you sync up your chemistry
Okay.
with each other?
Oh my God, Sekai was awesome. Sekai played older me, and she would come over sometimes, and we would like have dinner, and then we would work through our scenes and really get to know each other because we were playing the same person, right? And so we would come up with these mannerisms that we could have in common. Like if we were drinking, we would put our thumb on the top of it. So just little mannerisms that showed that we were the same person, even though we might have looked and acted differently due to the space that has occurred from 1988 to whenever older B lives.
KJ is fiercely protective and incredibly loyal, and always tries to be clear-eyed about what is right and what is wrong. She is the brawn of the group while also being emotionally intelligent, which is sort of a unique character. You know, there's usually that stereotype of being the emotional one and then the jock, but she kind of, merges the two, and she goes on this journey of self-discovery and really comes into herself a lot this season, and I am excited for audiences to see.
I play Erin. She is definitely the sheltered one out of the four, and she starts off to be very, very quiet, but also extremely determined. She wants to feel accepted, and especially in like a homogenous suburb of 1980s Ohio, being like one of the only colored girls in her neighborhood, she definitely wants to feel wanted. But but I would also describe her to be very aware of things and people around her. She tries to be considerate of other people's feelings and also really responsible in that sense of duty and honor and wanting to take care of the people that she loves. And then all of a sudden when all these crazy things start coming at her, we really get to see how she's feeling internally and how much she develops.
So we talked a little bit with Sofia and Camryn about music they listen to, like 80s styles they look at. Did you guys do anything like that to really get in the mindset of somebody who was growing up in 1988?
Yeah, I mean, Riley and I already listened to a little bit of 80s influence. Riley much more than I do. I'm more of a 70s gal, but I definitely have some Pat Benatar sprinkled in there that I really love. And you know, the soundtrack on the show, even I didn't even think to imagine some of these songs in the way that they're placed, but it really is mind-blowing, and I'm really excited for people to hear the music that we've included.
Yeah, I really like, so I listen to a lot of 80s music already, but I definitely did that more getting into the character of Erin. So I listened to a lot of The Smiths and The Cure and New Order. You might just hear a little bit of that in the show. And then back to the 70s, I listened to a lot of Bee Gees pre-disco.
So from there, I want to kind of go over some heavier moments in your guys' characters' arcs. For KJ, I think in episode 5, you find out kind of that your future isn't necessarily determined for you. Talk about maybe the anatomy of that scene a little bit, and just kind of maybe what your character is thinking at that moment. There's a lot going there. And then for young Erin, maybe talk about kind of what's going through her mind as older Erin's talking to her sister, and kind of, you know, there's some weighty parts there too as far as what's going on with.
In that scene that I believe you're referencing, KJ's worlds are she almost feels like her world is falling apart and yet like coming together at the same time. Her whole life she's felt different, and she's never really known what it was, and she's grown up in the 80s as well, so she's grown up in a time where being queer or part of the LGBTQ community was not okay, and so something that has felt so wrong to her whole life suddenly feels so right when it's right before her eyes, and it is an internal discovery for her, which I think is a very truthful representation of how that realization can be for a lot of people, and it really allows her to come into herself and for her confidence to grow, knowing who she is and learning to be proud of it.
I think for Erin's character, she quite naturally is forced to grow up very quickly, knowing that she has to take care of her family, help her mom go to the bank. And so she already has these expectations set for her, and when she's confronted that it isn't exactly how it's supposed to go, she feels very disappointed. And after interacting with adult Erin more, we can kind of see that the 12-year-old girl is still kind of in her. And I truly feel that Erin's character has had a lot of development over the episodes, and we get to see her go all these different types of emotions, and especially learning to trust herself within as well as trusting the girls around her, knowing that she hasn't really had a lot of that interactions with people her age.
First of all, start off with your serpent ring is really pretty.
Oh, I know. I thought like, oh, I need that. Okay.
Onto the question though, what was it like for you guys behind the scenes working with the adult actors of yourselves? Like, what was the chemistry like? How did you sync up to be playing the exact same character on the show?
I think the cool thing about Erin is that little Erin and adult Erin aren't really the exact same person on the outside. She has all these expectations set for herself, and like I said, like, it doesn't exactly meet. So Allie and I had a really good time playing off of that, and we had such a great time bonding, and I hope that people love what we did.
For me, the actress involved, she actually went to school with my sister and was in a playwriting class with her where they wrote plays about their families. And they would put these plays on, and Delia, who plays older KJ, actually has played me before in this play that my sister has written about her family. So I was shocked to find out that this connection existed, and so I think that she's a good choice. And I didn't get to spend much time with her, but she's very cool.
Go.
All right. They've asked most of my questions already. It's such a fantastic show, and I'm really liking how there's this balance of the whole sci-fi time travel storyline, and we've got to get back home. But then you have all these emotional conflicts for the younger girls about, do we really want to go back in time? And when you were going through it, were you thinking about that? Were you thinking about what your characters wanted in that situation, or was it more in the moment of what we do need?
Right. Well, something that's so cool about this show is that it is a sci-fi journey and experience with these larger-than-life situations that really no one would ever be put in, that you would think, would be mind-blowing for anybody. And yet they still find themselves asking that quintessential childhood question of what will I be when I grow up. And so we definitely found ourselves honing in on that more, and the girls' discoveries of themselves rather than the laser beams and time travel. And then I think it definitely led to a bit of self-discovery in real life and how we wanted our lives to go. And I think Riley and I definitely both want to remain in the industry, and hopefully the industry will allow us to stay.
And I think something that really stood out when I first discovered Paper Girls is that all the girls have such substance to them, and I noticed that a lot of media, especially women, are portrayed only have one personality trait. One is the player, one is the one that fights with everyone, or something like that. So it was nice to see that these girls aren't one-dimensional and that they're complicated, and that's how it actually is in real life.
Well, I get to play Prioress, and Prioress is a warrior in the Old Watch. She believes in what she is doing. She believes that the Old Watch is correct in their judgment, that time travel should not be messed with. And in that way, she follows orders until she gets a choice whether she does or not.
Question. So, what was your initial reaction when you first read the screenplay to your character?
My initial, I think I was given the audition sides first. I do not believe there was a script, so I had to make things up as I go. I remember thinking, wow, this is all over the place. Because I was unfamiliar with the graphic novels. And it's always been my mode of operation not to do research of what I'm auditioning for, simply because I did not want to give away all my power. Once you find out that, there's a long history and there's a gigantic fan base, and my audition would have, I don't think, not been as good because the nerves would have taken over. So I try not to do too much research. And so I just was trying to just make the given circumstances work. And then, if I remember correctly, they wanted to do a working audition, so that there were some guesses that I made that were wrong, and they wanted me to change. And I'm good with taking direction, and so I did, and it worked.
It's such an incredible character.
Thank you.
I was a huge fan of True
Oh, thank you.
So what
Prioress doesn't drink.
No, that's probably good for everyone.
Yes.
Yes. So can you talk to us a little bit about, I mean, without giving away anything pivotal, about how your character interacts with the girls? And I'll just stop there.
Prioress is used to time travel because she has to go and fix what the rebels has done, and so she's very good at the expression "when in Rome, do as the Romans do." So whatever time travel she happens to be at, she lands. She dresses like the locals. And she, that way the locals can put themselves at ease, and she gets her information, which is, as an actor, so much fun to play. And they allowed me to just play, silly them. And so it was kind of, it was like being a kid in a costume shop. You just get to play with costume, dialect, given circumstances, and just will trust that post will blend it all together.
And then kill all the witnesses.
One more time?
Then kill all the witnesses.
Or they don't remember everything. Whether it's because, sometimes when you have a traumatic experience, your body doesn't allow you to remember it all so that you can continue your life. That's Prioress.
Okay, so what was it like for you playing a character that looks at some of the music, technology, and everything in the show as ancient and out of date, even in reference to like the David Matthews Band shirt being referred to as dumb?
I know. Luckily, I didn't have to deal with any Dave Matthews shirts, because I am a Dave Matthews fan. It's just the given circumstances of the moment, and when Prioress sees the walk, to her it's not old technology. It's a clue that she is following the right lead. So that's how I see it as. I just see all of this as information leads to let me know, as a warrior, am I following the right leads?
At the end of the 4th episode, we see you come out of Prioress has like one mode in the first half of the season, but then at the end of the 4th episode, we see that she answers to somebody. We just see her chasing Zuko. So
it was amazing.
Yeah, and we see a little bit more inside Prioress's character. Can you talk about that moment and that scene?
It was an all-nighter. It was like at 3 a.m. in the morning, and I always love to try to bring 360 humanity to my characters, because everyone's afraid of something. My mode of operation has always been make the crew laugh and the producers cry. And so I loved having the challenge of being beholden to somebody else. It makes Prioress a lot more interesting, knowing that she has someone to answer to and to show fear. Which I think is true for everybody. Everybody's got somebody that they're scared of. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Thank you.
So, working with, a lot of young actresses and things like that, sometimes you don't always know what you're going to get in with young actors. Was there anything that surprised you with what they brought to set, what they showed up with for work?
It was a SAG rules about how long they could work that reminded me that they were young actors. Because on the day, while we're working, they were professionals. You know, so I did not think they didn't get in my way. I didn't have to be kinder or nicer because of young girls and their feelings. They left that behind, and they came well prepared professionals. So the only thing I had to do was every once in a while I had to do my coverage to a dot on the camera because we ran out of time using them. They were more like short adults.
What was your initial gut reaction when you first read the screenplay to your character and made you really want to jump into the story?
Oh man, well I don't usually play the heavy. This face usually plays like the sympathetic friend. So, and I was a heavy to 12-year-old girl, so that's not very tough. But to play a guy who has a lot of darkness to him, and the audience is confused by it, like, which side is this guy on? That was really fun for me, and he sort of goes back and forth. And when I took the job, I only had the first 5. Episodes 6, 7, and 8 were not finished and cleared by the studio on the network. So I kind of took the job, kind of took a blind leap, hoping it would, the last 3 episodes, it would work out for Larry. Have you guys seen it?
I haven't gotten that far.
Okay. He takes quite a turn at the end, which you will see. But it was, Chris is right. Chris is just a really great, thoughtful, smart writer. There was a lot to play with the character, so that made the decision really easy. Yeah.
You kind of answered this in talking about the script, but what made you want to do a time travel sci-fi show with minors?
Great question. Great question. Well, it sort of starts with Brian K. Vaughan and Cliff Chang. Those guys. I just met Brian today for the first time, actually. I was surprised at how young he is. He has such an incredible output. Whether it's Saga or, Wild Last Man is fantastic. Paper Girls. I'm so excited he's going to be doing this hopefully for another 40 years. So comic book fans have a lot to look forward to with Cliff and Brian. Yeah, it was really easy. I guess because the source material is so revered, and I trust fans of this stuff. I trust if there's a huge sort of fan output and a passionate fan base for these kinds of products, you trust that it's going to be good. But then once you read the script, who knows? But again, Chris is really good at character in the story, and he's very generous to all of the actors. We all have a lot of different things to play. Not every actor gets that gift. You get stuck on a show, and every episode you're doing the same thing, just wearing different clothes. So Chris was able to sort of make Larry more layered than I even anticipated him. But working with, I've never worked with little kids. I say little kids, they're young women. But it helped. I was saying earlier, it really helps with my own cynicism about the industry and my own work. I've been doing this for 20 years. Your heart gets broken so many times when you step on a show and you're like, oh my God, this is the one. It has this actor, oh my God, this person's in it, this writer's untouchable, this studio, this network, forget it. It's basically impossible to thread that needle, to find a show that finds a mass audience. It's just so hard. And so I walk into every job with my arms crossed. And the girls didn't. The girls showed up every day with a curiosity that I thought was lost from myself. So I hope to take that. No, I've worked since this job. I worked on 2 other jobs, and I tried to bring some Paper Girls openness with me and be a little less cynical. But they were wonderful. Yeah, I was anxious. I was anxious working with kids who don't have a lot of experience, but they were so open and vulnerable and pleasant every day. They were wonderful.
So you said you're not used to playing the heavy character. So what was it like for you playing a character that was so different and complex, and also how did you prepare yourself for that role?
There's very little preparation besides living with the script. I don't do I don't build some, actors take out journals and create elaborate backstories, and I just sort of go with what is written on the page. And thankfully, Chris was around, so I was able to ask him a lot of questions if I was confused about anything. But yeah, preparation, I don't know, like I came up in the theater, so it's the words. Like you don't need to write a diary, you don't need to create a backstory. Like when you're doing a play, unless it's a new play, but usually the playwright isn't around. The playwright is either dead or is not there. So you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. That is your map to telling the story. Honor the words, honor the words, honor the words. David Mamet is a very complicated and conflicted character, and his politics are not mine. But he wrote this wonderful book on acting called, I'm forgetting the title of it, edit that part out. But there's a bit there, and of course his opinion is different because he's a writer. That if the writing is good, and if you just let your mind and your ego and your insecurity, you let that go, and you just follow the words, you follow the character that is written, you'll be fine. It'll always work out in the end if you trust the language. So I try to do that every time. I try to just put my own insecurity and fear about how I'm gonna look, how people are going to judge my performance. I try, and sometimes fail, to throw that away and just be true to the words and the language and let them sort of speak through me. And most of the time it works, but sometimes it doesn't, and that's okay too. No one bats 1,000.
Larry has a great scene with older Erin, you and Allie.
Yes.
In the robot.
Yeah.
Best word to say it. Can you go back to that scene and kind of there's a lot behind that scene that some of it's unsaid. And it's really coming through the performance. Yeah,
the stakes need to be set up for the audience a bit there. The girls have done it, and then the adults have to come in and sort of give the adult perspective of the stakes. Of if Allie's character doesn't figure this out, all is lost. And these little girls are lost. There's a lot that's unsaid. I hope that played. I hope that came across. But that scene was really fun to play with Allie. I hadn't known Allie before doing this job, and Allie was so game. She was such a great scene partner. I'm glad that scene resonated with you. It was a fun scene to shoot. Because the stakes are different for adults as opposed to kids. So you have to give the audience both perspectives. Yeah.
A question for you for writing with Stephanie Folsom too.
Absolutely.
What was the most important aspect for both of you to capture from the comic book and translate it to the screen?
Let's see. I know for Stephanie in selling this show, she really kind of felt like there wasn't a stand by me for girls. There wasn't some text that she could kind of grow up with where she could see herself represented in the way that this show represented her. And I think that's kind of been our battle cry as we've gone through the show. I think you'll hear the girls say it too. We encourage them to kind of give us feedback. Does this feel true? Does this feel like something that could be in your life? And that's been our North Star. For me, as a huge fan of this, I used to be a bookseller at Skylight Books in Los Angeles, and I would sell the hell out of this book because I loved it and I thought everyone should read it. And I was terrified when I heard they were making it. But that ended up being the reason to do it, especially once I found out Brian and Cliff would be involved and that Amazon was committed to maintaining, the more jagged tone that I think the comic lives or dies by. So for me, that was it. Tone was all.
Oh, okay. So I think anytime you adapt a comic book, there's always that concern about rabid comic book fans
Sure.
and their reaction. Did that ever even cross your guys' mind, or are you worried about it at all?
Well, I do. I want to super serve the comic fan because I'm one. I love it, and I would want to see some of those moments reflected back at me. But as I thought about the experience I'd want to have, I wouldn't want it to just be what we call Paper Girls karaoke. I want to be surprised. I think at a certain point as a dramatist, your only tool is surprise. So can we bring you back to some of these same moments in a different way? Can we jump off of something that you recognize and, show you a different shade of it? I want to constantly be referencing the source material, but hopefully giving you a new experience that does both. But I mean, look, the last thing I want to do is be the guy who came in and thought he knew better than Brian and Cliff, because I love what they did. I think it's got such an internal logic to it, and certainly it's the Bible we return to every time we don't know where to go.
I think we're ping-ponging this time. Was there, you said you were a big fan of the book.
Yes.
So was there a specific scene or even panel that you were just psyched about seeing visual, become a cinematic?
That's a great question. Wow, there's a lot I like. Well, there's one that we haven't gotten to yet. And we're allowed to talk about spoilers, or?
Sure. Spoiler alert.
I mean, I think the Mac KJ kiss on the rooftop of that futuristic building, which is way deep in the story, is that's a panel I have on my wall. The evolution stuff was just what will that look like? How do we make that feel equal to what Cliff did? I don't know. The use of color in the show was daunting, but I think exciting. So yeah, every season, and we've worked a little on a season 2. I try to pull some panels that I think are an inspiration and keep them over my desk to kind of help me remember the spirit of what's been done. Yeah.
Can you talk about the 4th episode, A New Period?
Oh, yeah.
And talk about the tampon thing.
Absolutely.
Which, to me, I think it really shows how much fun the girls are, and how much they grow together as characters.
So I'm glad you brought that up. I think that is the best scene in the first season. I think that is our tone. I think that is a show scene only we can do. And I think it just kind of demonstrates what we were able to do that departs from the comic, which is, Cliff and Brian wrote this over 30 episodes in a great hurry many years ago. What we've been able to do is have this conversation of, our writer's room is all women other than me. We have women in their 20s, women in their 60s. We have women of every ethnicity represented on the show. We have women of every sexuality represented on the show. Have these larger conversations, and then it's all female directors, and then, of course, the girls themselves. And that was a topic that was so unique for, and specific to everybody that kind of wrote it, filmed it, and acted it, that it just snowballed as we went. The writers had a blast that day. The director was like, let's go on this. And the girls were just ad-libbing and adding things, maybe from experience, maybe not. But I just think that's the best of what this collaborative medium can do, which is take a topic that's suggested in the source material, but really just expand that conversation, invite more people into it, and get a very hilarious result on the other end. Yeah.
Okay. So in the trailer, the music just the music's iconic. Music sets the tone for everything. What was it like hearing the soundtrack for the show?
Let's see. I mean, so in the trailer, it's "Hazy Shade of Winter," which is a great song. I think we were always trying to look to go one to the right of the song you knew, because I think if there are other shows like Stranger Things that do a really good job of hitting the nostalgia head on, giving you the bright colors and the leg warmers and the things you remember from the 80s, we wanted to be the show kind of listening to New Order in the corner and smoking a cigarette. We wanted to kind of be a little darker, try to show all the colors of what it was, because in part this is a story about how, the 80s, the 90s, even the time we live now, is a very different place for young girls, and especially young girls of color, and that their experiences would be dictated by the fact that they had come from 88, and so these are their attitudes, but also they're going to these other places, and this is what they'll think of these things. And so we wanted the music to follow that. And in the spirit of that, we even had the girls kind of create their own playlists for their characters too, to kind of give a sense of what they thought their internal lives were like. And so music was a real kind of guiding principle on the show.
No, you go first.
Oh, so I was just gonna, because you brought up Stranger Things.
Yeah.
I'm sure that comparison is gonna come up. What's
Sure.
your response to somebody who might kind of look at this show and be like, oh, it's just Stranger Things for girls?
I would politely point out that it predated Stranger Things, and that Brian and Cliff wrote it back then. but that I think there's room for everybody. I think our show aspires to be a little more Stand By Me. I think we pretty quickly differentiate ourselves in terms of like the tone and the depth we're going to, and taking nothing from them because I think they do what they do really well. But we couldn't write that show, and I like to think they couldn't write ours. So.
How did you balance making sure the dramatic storyline doesn't get overshadowed by the sci-fi, or the kind of the genre stuff?
That was a huge challenge because, but we constantly reminded ourselves that if you don't care about the characters, then the rest of it just feels like spectacle. You know what I mean? Like if you don't actually, if you're not concerned about what happens to their well-being, who they're losing, what is lost every time you have to move through time, the rest of it doesn't matter. So we always were character first, but at the same time, it's Paper Girls. Like I want to feel that scope. I'm gonna be so mad if it's just like in a box. I want to go to these big places and have this big adventure. So, hiring great people, it's crass, but like having the budget was important, because we're going to take these things on, we want to take them on. Just asking ourselves, like, what would I want to see if money were no object? It was a little bit of an object, but, that's why we're doing multiple seasons.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.